let's start off with Guillermo's vision. So, and you can tell me on each one of these differences if you like it or if you don't.
Hate it.
First of all, the original idea was to have Ian Holm probably reprise his role as Bilbo. So this was probably due to the recent success of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. So Guillermo obviously saw that and believed that the studio would be able to de-age Ian Holm and make it a viable and suitable option for Bilbo. And Ian Holm himself ended up declining probably because of his age. But yeah, that was the main thing initially, was like Ian Holm.
I don't know if that would have worked really, because I mean...
And obviously we see Ian Holm in the Peter Jackson's one. But like he's only in it for like a minute at the start and a minute at the end, you know. Anyways, the main person that Guillermo wanted was James McAvoy after Ian Holm declined. And James McAvoy himself eventually declined because he just didn't feel like he was right for the part.
Well,
and
that's a big thing to turn down when you know, like,
so I always feel like fair play to those actors, especially when it's not like, you know, Sean Connery or something, who famously turned down Gandalf because he didn't understand the script.
Yeah, but I think that's something that, like, I mean, you can easily turn something down when it's been, who's this director? Never heard of him. What's the story? Don't really know what's going on. But when, like, Lord of the Rings has been the most successful film of all time, and then 10 years later, like, oh, we're going to do the Hobbit story. Everybody knows that as well. And that's probably, the story of the Hobbit was probably even more famous than the book of the Lord of the Rings before the films came out. Like, I mean, you know, because lots of schools around the world would have students reading that book in their schools. So I'm very surprised that any actor would, like, given the opportunity, that they would.
But that's why I respect
as you said, fair play to them, because they did go on and they got, probably the best thing about the Hobbit movies is the casting of Martin Freeman.
And he, by the way, I don't want to say that he wasn't a viable option as well. He did come up in conversations with Guillermo.
James McAvoy or
Guillermo. Sorry, Martin Freeman.
Martin Freeman, yeah.
So it wasn't like, oh, it was definitely going to be James
Plan B.
James McAvoy turned it down. And he obviously felt like, look, if I'm not right for this role, this might ruin my career.
Surprising though, because I think he could have been good.
I think he could have been good as well.
He's a great actor as well.
Especially in that time. Like, he would have been a nice, fresh face. You know, we saw him as Mr. Tumnus, and he wasn't a very fresh face in Narnia. But still, I think he's a great actor. Another guy, I don't know if you know this fella, Ron Perlman. You might know the name. He's most commonly known, or his biggest role would probably be Hellboy, but he's in loads of movies. He's often in Guillermo Del Toro movies.
Yeah, I know.
And he's in like a gazillion other movies. But anyways, he was approached to play Thorin, but was asked who he connected with the most. So he was basically given free reign of, like, pick who you want. It's kind of like Tarantino going to Samuel L. Jackson and be like, who do you want to be? Do you know?
Oh, okay.
So he really likes Ron Perlman. So Ron Perlman was very interested in voicing Smaug, but eventually settled on playing the part of Beorn. So he was casted. I think he was officially casted to be Beorn. And then another change was Brian Blessed. He recently passed away in 2023. He was... I've often tweeted him as being a good Tom Bombadil. I think I put it up on a TikTok before. But he was considered for the role of Thorin Oakenshield. Ian McShane, another famous actor, he was cast as Balin. And then a final casting thing here is Doug Jones, who plays the guy in prosthetics in nearly every single one of Del Toro's movies. In Pan's Labyrinth, he's the pale guy that does this with the eyes, and he's also the Fauno guy, so he's kind of like Andy Serkis. He does a lot of this stuff. And he's also the creature from The Shape of Water, which won Best Oscar.
I've seen some tweam or some tweet or some meme. Tweem, it's a new thing.
Yeah,
it's a tweet meme. I've seen something where, like, there's loads of, like, maybe 4 or 8 images of, do you know this is the same guy? And I was like,
exactly.
That kind of thing, like,
so he's one of those guys. He's kind of like
Jed Brophy?
Jed Brophy, yeah. He's kind of like Jed Brophy. But this guy's always in prosthetics. And he was actually cast for Thranduil, but he was also in talks to be the Goblin King in prosthetics. So
Lee Pace again, like another amazing
class
casting for Thranduil. Yeah, I kind of didn't appreciate his performance as much as well the first time I watched it. So I would nearly go back and watch them all again just for...
Yeah, there's so many good things in The Hobbit.
Excellent. I do enjoy lots of the scenes where, like, they're not actually... Like,
in a battle or like running around.
I like seeing
character scenes.
I like seeing scenes with like Gandalf and Galadriel and Elrond and Thranduil and all those kind of characters as well. So it is really cool to see those characters. Just more on-screen time. So
Tauriel.
Oh yeah, she's great.
Tauriel and Keeley. Those are the best ones. So a few other changes here. It has been quoted that Del Toro wanted to double down on the storybook fairy tale aspect as it is a children's book, but he wanted to keep his style of starting light, and as the film goes on, it goes into like darker tones, just like Pan's Labyrinth. So this was to reflect a loss of innocence following World War One, which Tolkien himself fought in. So yeah, he wanted to kind of look at Tolkien's life, and I know he doesn't like allegory, but he wanted to kind of start off as kind of like a fantastical element and then like go into like dark, this is evil and bad. And also just to go on the whole like tone thing, one big change that Guillermo would have brought is he planned to use a digital sky replacement to infuse the films with a painted aesthetic, color coding them to suit Tolkien's vivid descriptions of the changing seasons during Bilbo's journey. So he's quoted to say,
don't know how well that would have worked out.
Yeah, his quote was, "There's a green passage, a blue passage, a crimson passage, and a gold passage." So this was going to literally be like the sky, the aesthetic, the color code, and the hue.
If it's so like wild, it could be kind of cool. Like, you know, if it could be kind of like Wizard of Oz, kind of just like some crazy color scape where you kind of because if it's only just like, sorry, I thought you were going to say he was going to try and put like a bit of a small little like light hue in the background where it's barely noticeable, but it's there.
Well, we don't know. Like, this is just like, that was the quote we got, but also it's been talked about like he wanted to change the sky to reflect the seasons.
Well, I don't know what. So we don't know how it would have turned out, but I was going to just say my thoughts on that would have been that if it was kind of like a very kind of a subtle in their, what they were trying to do would be like, let's have a subtle change, let's put these little things on there, and hopefully it'll be kind of like almost unnoticeable, but people will kind of have this feeling. I don't think that would have worked at all. And I think that if you're going to do something like this, you need to go hard and be like, it's the gold section, everything's just like the sky is like really gold, like, and it's so out there, it's kind of like, well, everyone notices, okay, this is purposefully done.
And no, I get that.
And like it's a storytelling technique basically.
Yeah, but I think I would have gotten tired of it.
I would have as well.
I think
I'm not saying it would have been good.
It's a nice artsy movie, but I want to have rewatch value, and I don't want to be watching 4 colors over the space of whatever amount of hours. And we'll get into that as well, like what his idea was for movies. And
sure.
So a couple more changes. You can actually see images of his concept art, which diverges massively from Peter Jackson's trilogy. So a lot of it is kind of cool, and it's very Del Toro-ish, but one of the big changes here now, this is a biggie. So Smaug. So he wanted a different design to the usual dragon style. He wanted eyes that were difficult to locate, hidden on the enormous horned axe head. So there's concept art of like, you know, kind of horns coming out the side and like a big kind of axe thing here, and then like eyes way back here. And it was supposed to be for, you know, to add tension to the scenes when Bilbo is like trying to hide from the glare of his eyes and all this kind of stuff. So I don't really know, but his body was going to be more resemble the look of a snake, and he was also going to have like tiny little arms, kind of like a T-Rex. And the whole point of these tiny arms was in close-up shots of Smaug. He was supposed to the plan was to give Smaug more emotive and like showing hand gestures to give him more emotion.
That's kind of a stupid argument, because I think we've seen how well it turned out in the final piece that we saw, that like the emotions that people can do, like voice actors are incredible, and for Benedict Cumberbatch to be able to get the kind of range of emotions that he did using just his voice alone, and then not his voice alone, because we obviously have the on-screen.
So I'm crawling around on the ground like an idiot.
Also for people that don't know, that was also similar to how Gollum and Smeagol were shot in the Lord of the Rings, and in this as well, I suppose.
I don't think they ended up using any of that. He crawled around to kind of give to do that, but they ended up not using it. But I think it helped him.
It helped him get into the performance and get into the character as well. So he did a lot of like slithering and crawling around the floor. But did they have any like motion capture things like hooked up to him?
I've seen the videos. I don't even think they did. I think the videos we've seen are him practicing for it, kind of, and doing the performance with his face, mouth, and voice. But
they use his face though as well.
They do, yeah. He had like even around his lips, he had like makeup on there, and he had like the dots on his face for the motion capture. But yeah, he did. I don't know. It's a joke I've heard before that he thought he was doing the motion capture. I don't know if that's accurate. But I don't think they ended up using any of that.
He's just there like crawling around the floor like, is this good, guys? They're like, yeah.
Benedict, the microphone's up here.
Yes, Mr. Cumberbatch, that's great. Just keep it going.
We're going to sell a lot of these. And another thing as well, that Smaug's mouth was going to be much more human-like and expressive. And I can see where he's coming from. I know like the live action Lion King movie hadn't come out at that point, but like a lot of people complained that like there was no expression on the lions' mouths or any of the animals' mouths. But I think they still did it. Do you know the live action Lion King?
I've seen a lot of people were like, I don't remember.
"Oh no, Dad, Simba!" It was too real that you didn't feel for them.
Yeah, well, it was just a bad idea anyway. It's just start turning all these into live action, where it's like the cartoons are brilliant.
Yeah, but you're right with Smaug as well. Like that was another big win for the Hobbit. I think they did that excellently.
Smaug was brilliant. Yeah,
Smaug, as Peter Jackson would say. Del Toro did admit that his designs for Smaug weren't very popular at Weta, which makes me feel good because we love you guys at Weta. When Jackson took over, the creature returned to a much more classic look of a dragon. So yeah, that was
thank God for that.
That was a big change. Yeah. Again, I will get into why Peter Jackson came in, but also another change. Have you seen? I think this change wasn't just when Guillermo Del Toro left, but it was a change in hindsight as well. Have you seen the original concepts or the original costume for Azog?
I've definitely tweeted now. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure I have seen them, but I don't remember them.
Because Azog, as we know, the pale orc, he's just a giant 7-foot, like pale CGI, badly rendered game looking creature. But like,
he's not even final boss kind of.
Yeah, look. He's not even final boss. He's kind of like lieutenant. But like, there's a lot of images, and I think actually before The Hobbit came out, there was published magazines with this guy in all of his gear. He was basically like Lurtz. He was completely dressed head to toe, prosthetics. He had kind of garments and armor and pelts and everything all over, and he looked horrifying. Now, to be fair, I don't think he looks great as a villain, but he was very, very different.
Wow.
And I think it might have been a Sauron troll kind of effect where basically they just CGI'd over this guy's performance.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But I don't know how they could come to the realization or the final decision, really, I suppose, that they were kind of like, Joe, it looks much better. Just this weird CGI blob that just, like, his skin complexion just looks fake and everything is just, I don't know, just...
I don't know why they landed on that. But yeah, on the whole prosthetic thing as well, Del Toro wanted to use as much practical effects as possible with a heavy reliance on animatronics. And we know that Jackson's over-the-top CGI, like what it did to the likes of Sir Ian McKellen. If you guys haven't seen the video, there's footage of poor Ian like breaking down, saying this is not why I became an actor. And yeah, it's awful. But like, obviously there was a lot of CGI.
But again, I'm just thinking that a lot of, I don't want to just, you know, cast the book at Peter Jackson and say like, oh, he's terrible for doing this again. I think a lot of those issues are for coming in last minute and kind of like trying to just pick up the pieces and kind of go, okay, look, well, it's just not feasible to be able to get this done in practical costumes and practical designs and sets, whatever. We know that, for example, production started for Lord of the Rings over a year before shooting started.
Yeah, you know, it was the whole thing was like 4 years pre-production.
Yeah,
like I think like a year before is when they got like actors involved and stuff, but they were like growing fields and growing the Shire for like years beforehand.
Yeah, of course they were. But just like, you
concept design and all that kind of stuff.
But like just building the armor and designing and creating all of the...
Yeah, so you might even be like, I actually don't have enough time to create armor or prosthetics.
No, exactly. If you could, he'd be like, okay, I need to go to the costume department and tell them I need all, and they were just like, no, we just literally physically don't have the manpower to be able to
get a green screen. It's a lot cheaper.
So that's what I'm assuming. I'm assuming that Peter Jackson, we know that for certain things you have to use a green screen, like for example when you're shooting things like for human or men interacting with hobbits or dwarves interacting with whatever, you need to shoot them in different ways. But even for lots of the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson did manage to do that, where they were just using like forced perspective and they were in the same room and things like that as well. So I'm assuming, knowing what Peter Jackson has done in the past, he's only going to go to this as like a last resort. I'm assuming that he went to green screen a lot of stuff just because he was like backed up against the wall. They were like, we've got time constraints, we need to get this done, and you've got one chance of doing this, basically. Yeah,
pretty much. Now, one thing that Guillermo wasn't going to change was Gollum, because he would have stayed the exact same. It would have been Andy Serkis, fully CG character. Del Toro quote said, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." So one of the biggest changes, this is the final one I have, one of the biggest changes was the Battle of the Five Armies. So Tolkien stated before how he hated the glorification of war in film and how war is neither epic or entertaining. Del Toro agreed with this, I suppose, and he wanted to follow the book more closely.
Really?
Do you remember what happens in the book?
Where Bilbo just like gets knocked out and wakes up and the battle's already finished.
Exactly, yeah. He wakes up and we do see this in the Battle of the Five Armies where Bilbo gets knocked out, but the difference between the book and the movies, I suppose, is it's not all Bilbo's perspective. We've got so many other storylines going in different directions. So if Bilbo gets knocked out, we still get to switch over and see what Fili and Kili are doing, and we've got this whole war and there's so many extra characters. But in the book, Bilbo wakes up and he's like, oh, a war happened, and the whole thing was explained to him.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what would have happened in Guillermo del Toro's version as well. Wow. So interesting.
Could have been interesting.
It wouldn't mean we wouldn't have had the Battle of the Five Armies, which that could have been good.
That would have been good, yeah. But then I'm assuming what they probably would have done as well is like when they're explaining it, they'd have like cutscenes back to what happened then as well. So
possibly,
that actually wouldn't even be a bad idea. Like if you wanted to, like, I'm assuming the directors are the higher ups, like the studio were probably just like, no, we're definitely having a battle in here because that's what the audience is going to want to see, and people love seeing battles play on the screen. So I can understand completely why a studio would probably step in and have their notes and be like, look, we're definitely not doing this one where he just misses the whole thing. But if a writer was like, okay, well, how about we do it so it's that true to the book where Bilbo gets knocked out, then he wakes up and somebody explains it back to him, and while they're explaining it, then we can zoom into that perspective and kind of. So imagine like Gandalf's just telling him, oh, well, then this is what happened, this is what happened. We go back into Gandalf's perspective and see like the battle from what Gandalf saw or whatever,
Yeah, like I think that's a good idea, so well done. I don't know if that's what Guillermo had planned. Like I think I'm going to get into it now, the number of movies that was initially planned, so that might give you more of a hint of what was going on. So the number of movies, Del Toro envisioned 2 movies. Yeah. Originally, he floated the idea of just one movie.
Really?
Just one movie, but then the idea of 2 movies, with the first being all about Bilbo's journey, and the second movie was going to be the series events that weren't witnessed in the book, like Gandalf visiting the White Council and also Gollum's journey to Mordor, which could have been kind of cool. And by the way, I just want to say, this isn't just Guillermo. This was Peter Jackson's vision as well. In fact, I think it was actually his idea.
I think when he came on board, it was 2 movies, wasn't it?
Well, he came on board, but no, he came on board as director. Now, Peter Jackson was producing this. Like, he was always on board. Like, he was always part of the team from the very beginning. And I think it actually was his idea to do this two movie thing of like the first one being kind of the story, the second one, the sequel. Not even like part 2. It's like a sequel where we're seeing all the other events. So yeah, that was kind of Peter Jackson's baby as well. And it was soon realized that the sequel wouldn't have been a cohesive story. So the decision was just to split the one story into 2 separate screenplay movies. So that's kind of what the idea was, floating around for a long time. Now, Del Toro, I have this here as well, that Del Toro was never previously a fan of Tolkien, but he poured into the books and he sought to honour the essence of the tale and wanted to infuse his own unique vision into it as well. 2 years were devoted to conceptualizing, crafting imaginative creature designs and adapting the book into 2 simultaneously shot screenplay. So, Johnny, what was the issue? Why did Del Toro leave? Why would you think?
I don't know. Did he ever was it that the studio came in and demanded that there be 3 films?
No.
No.
No, it was all good to go for 2 films at this point. I don't expect you to know the answer. I don't expect many people to know the answer to this.
I don't know.
So, very unfortunate. During these 2 years of the whole conceptualization and crafting the designs and whatnot, MGM, the owner of the distribution rights to The Hobbit, was going through bankruptcy negotiations. So this obviously affected the entire project, and left it kind of in a state of limbo, and nothing was getting done. There was uncertainty, and there was constant delays. So unfortunately, the prolonged waiting forced Del Toro to part ways with the project rather than waiting for the green light. So it was just like up in the air. Nobody knew it was going to be resolved.
So they were like paying him almost kind of like on retainer, holding him for that project, and eventually, or else
I don't even
being paid or something.
I don't know. I think it's kind of like, this is yours and you get paid at the end. Yeah. I don't know how it works in Hollywood.
It's probably you sign a contract and you need to be locked in for that period of time. Like what's happened, we've seen before with when Gandalf wasn't going to make it to be when Ian McKellen wasn't going to make it because of X-Men. Because of X-Men, he'd been locked in to play that character.
And Peter Jackson changed
he changed the order of things so that he would be able to do it. It's probably similar with the director, that they sign up for a film and they sign a contract and say, okay, we have from here to here. And then basically Guillermo was like, okay, well, if this project isn't going to go ahead, I need to be able to free up my contract so that I can get signed up for the films.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I also think that, I'm just imagining this, that when you sign that contract, it doesn't specifically massively include the concept design and all that kind of stuff. That might be a bit okay, we'll fund you, but we won't pay you. That's what I imagine, because I kind of feel like, I'd love to be just like up in the air in limbo, getting paid for years, not knowing if a project is going ahead. So that's my vibe. I think that you don't get paid necessarily. You might just be, right, you'll get paid once it's greenlit. But anyways, Guillermo said, "It was the hardest decision I've ever taken. I feel incredible heartache. I feel terrible about it." So that's what he said on a video. In unfortunate irony, the MGM situation was finally resolved just a couple of months later. Peter Jackson then stepped in at the last minute from producer to director. I was about to say projector. From producer to director. He's quoted saying, "In terms of Guillermo's designs, I looked at them and thought this would be a fantastic Guillermo Del Toro film." But obviously, Peter Jackson, he wasn't going to create a Guillermo Del Toro movie, so he started everything from scratch, and he only had a few months to do it. So that was the main difference. He had 4 years before the Lord of the Rings movie started filming to prepare everything, just even adapting the books. And in this, Guillermo had a lot of the groundwork done, but at the same time, he was like, all the designs I'm changing, all like the way we're going to shoot everything. I don't know about the screenplays. Like, obviously that had to change. That ended up being changed by the studio. Then I feel like the studio had more a say coming in and being like, actually, we're going to change it now to 3 movies. And I think that was only decided after the first movie came out.
What?
I think so. I thought I heard that somewhere. I thought I read that somewhere, and I was trying to find some proof for that.
This would be the moment to tell us.
But that's tough. Yeah, so what was your overall opinion on Guillermo Del Toro's Hobbit movies that we almost got?
I mean, he's got some movies that I think are great. He's got some movies that I don't particularly like. I think as a director, he's hit or miss. But when you're watching a movie, you're like, when you're watching a Guillermo del Toro movie, you're like, I know what that.
He's got a very unique fingerprint when it comes to movies. Yeah, you're like, this is, and a lot of it is practical, which I do like, but it's very. I don't want to say artsy, but it's just very.
You said you said a few things that I was like getting big like thumbs up, and then other things that were like big thumbs down. Yeah. So, like, I mean, I would not have liked... I love Smaug, and I love how he turned out. And I definitely would not have liked to have this crazy, weird, like, non-dragon thing where maybe, where he said, like, if it's not broke, don't fix it, talking about Gollum, that's fine. But he's like, and you were saying, well, they didn't really have a Smaug. But, like, we've read the books, and you when you hear about a dragon, we all
you don't think of a big T-Rex.
We all know what a dragon is. Like, a dragon. If you just say it was a monster, it could be anything. But like, I think Guillermo Del Toro, he's got a very like active imagination when it comes to like monstrous things. So
lots
I'm
of
sure
monster designs.
Yeah, he was like really like, I got to fit some of my monster ideas into this thing.
I think he wasn't really adapting the book into a movie. He was like adapting his ideas and concepts into Tolkien's world. So he did mention how he wanted it to be like a fairy tale story, especially in the beginning or the first half, or at least the first film.
Yeah, again, I don't know. There's certain things. Well, I like the more idea of the practical effects, and I think that could have turned out better for certain things. Definitely with like maybe the dwarves in general, and I don't know. There's a whole lot of it, but I think in general, I don't know how. I'd like to have two. I'd like to have
both. The two experiences.
I'd like to have Guillermo del Toro's films,
and I want to have a proper done Peter Jackson.
I'd like PJ ones done where he's got like 4 years of pre-production, and then also, I was just thinking about there. I don't think the Lord of the Rings films would probably ever or should ever be remade. Redone. I hope not. But I'd be well up for.
I do,
yeah,
but
I probably will.
Hope,
like
I hope
in time,
ages later, and I want them to do even more crazier than Guillermo del Toro. I want a completely different vision.
Oh yeah,
it could be as artsy as you want.
Oh yeah, I don't want someone to just kind of like do exactly like almost like scene for scene, shot for shot, like they've done with other movies where they've taken a movie from the 70s and they've just like like Dune or something like that. I want a film if they are going to remake the Lord of the Rings at some point in the future. I'd love a completely like wildly different vision on that. But I was going to say with the Hobbit, I'd love them to take the errors and the things that like what have we learned from our mistakes here and take them and create another version, maybe even a one-off movie or a two-part movie. Like you said there, I don't dislike the idea of having one story focus on Bilbo's journey and then a second story picking up the external stories that are going on around that, like culminating maybe in those two stories coming together, or I don't know how they would do it, but like that sounds pretty cool to me. And trying to tidy up on CGI, that was a complete disaster. Remove some of these crazy side characters and extra stories that were completely unnecessary. I think you could get a really good story in there.
Yeah, it could be like. I think the harder thing to adapt is Lord of the Rings. Like The Hobbit is an easier thing to adapt. But like this research, and you can tell from this podcast, it just goes to show it's not anyone's fault. Like a lot of people point the finger and blame people, but like, and a lot of people did that with Peter Jackson. And I'm like, it's stupid. Logistics of these big companies.
You don't just become a bad director immediately, like after you've done one of the greatest movie trilogies of all time.
And like I did believe for a long time, Peter Jackson's just trying to go with the modern curve of overusing CGI or using that technology to its most. But you're probably right. What you said earlier, you're like, he didn't have time to prepare the designs and the concepts that he wanted, because there was probably a bunch of stuff being created for Guillermo del Toro's. It was probably like weird armor being created for the orcs and the Uruk-hai.
Like, how long does it take to scout locations for when you're shooting? Like, is
another thing.
Like, they were like,
how long does it take to scout a CGI screen? Not long. Let us know what you think of Guillermo del Toro's vision. Did you like it? Would you prefer to Peter Jackson's, or do you like Peter Jackson's The Hobbit movies? Because we're kind of indifferent. I think I like them more than you do.
Yeah, I think you like them more than I do, but I think also it's been like a long enough period where I feel like I'm starting to kind of be like, you know what, maybe just give them another go.
Another thing as well for me is that you and I, obviously, we set up a podcast. We're obsessed with Peter Jackson's original trilogy, and we like everything about that. So that means like watching the appendices, the behind the scenes, like listening to the music and all that kind of stuff, trying to get like every little extra minute out of the Peter Jackson movies. And the Hobbit movies are set in the same world.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing where I even like watching the behind the scenes of the Hobbit movies, all that kind of stuff as well, because I just find it's the same feel that I get.
I've never watched them, and I actually feel like I would really enjoy that.
They actually are very good. They actually accentuate the...
Do you have the discs on them?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, well there. I might... I'd look forward to watching them even more than rewatching the films.
Yeah, they are good, and they actually do give you a little bit more of an appreciation of some of the the prosthetics and stuff that were used that maybe you didn't even see.
Well, there you go.
And Peter Jackson does talk a little bit about Guillermo in those. He does say like, well, Guillermo did a fantastic job in this, so I had to go on the back of that. And, you know, he's never disrespecting him in any ways because they didn't fight, but it is interesting to see his name dropped all the time. So yeah, guys, I'll probably drop a poll on Spotify which one you prefer, Guillermo's possible one or Peter Jackson's one, and you can let us know in the comments as well below on YouTube if you're watching us there, and please don't forget to subscribe as well.